It's gonna be hot. This episode is gonna be so spicy. I had to wear my chili pepper shirt today because it's gonna be so hot. Self-funding is not your solution for rising health insurance costs. Welcome back to another episode of the Benefits Insider. I'm your host, Chris Hamilton, and today I'm gonna share my thoughts on self-funding, why it's not your solution for rising health insurance costs, and what you should be considering if you're looking at a self-funded health plan. At the end of this episode, in the next few minutes, you're going to understand the biggest mistakes that I think employers are making in today's market when they're considering self-funded health plans and how to avoid them to reduce the cost of your company's health insurance for your company and your employees, increasing your profitability and valuation, but also doing the same for your employees, helping their pocketbook and helping them get access to better health benefits and reducing their out-of-pocket costs at the same time. So I'm going to jump into this. I'm pretty active on social media if you follow me there. I'm also active in our industry, attending a lot of conferences. I also do teaching for other advisors around the country on some of the processes that we use within the Benefits Insider. I don't own the solution, but all of us coming together collectively own the solution that ails a lot of our businesses, and including my own business, our own business here at Hotchkiss. We've had to grapple with rising healthcare costs over our almost 50 years in existence. And, if you followed me at any point in time, you know I am a big proponent of self-funding, but I don't think it is the solution. I think it's part of a solution. And that's what I want to talk about today, because a lot of advisors that I talk to around the country, and even some employers, perhaps you've even thought this or it's been explained to you by another advisor, that self-funding is the solution to rising health insurance costs. And if you follow me for any point in time, you know that I talk about healthcare costs translate to insurance costs. The higher your healthcare costs are, which is going to the doctor, getting prescriptions, paying for hospital visits, cancer infusions, all those sorts of things, the higher those costs that you pay, the more your insurance costs have to be to offset them. And if you're in a fully insured plan, those costs also for insurance have to be higher because it has to provide profitability to your insurance carrier. They're for-profit entities. The vast majority of them are publicly traded. So they've got to be able to make money in the process. And so a lot of times, advisors, particularly if they're talking to fully insured employers, are telling them self-funding is the way to go. And I do think that self-funding is something that needs to be considered by more companies than do consider it today. I think it's been used as a scare tactic in a lot of instances, particularly for employers that have less than 500 employees. There's different brokerages out there that will talk about how it's not right for companies and whatnot, but we see employers that have even less than 50 employees on their plan successfully, partially self-funding. Now, just for nomenclature purposes, if I talk about self-funding and you've got less than 10,000 employees, I'm talking about partially self-funding. You'll never be fully self-insured with 50 or 500 employees. There's always going to be a reinsurance company that provides catastrophic coverage against any one single large claim, like a preemie baby or a big cancer claim, or they'll provide insurance on top of that that protects your total spend. So you go into a self-funded or a partially self-funded plan knowing your worst case scenario max budget at the start of the year. So there's no surprises there. So if I'm talking about self-funding, I'm talking about partially self-funding. So a lot of times I'll talk with advisors like, hey, what are you doing with your clients? Or I'm talking with an employer like you. What are some of the things that you've considered in the past to control costs? And they said, well, this is common, self-funding. Self-funding is where we want to be. And we're not big enough. We don't have the ability to be self-funded right now. But someday we'll be self-funded, and that's going to be our solution. And I want to share with you, while I understand at least we've grasped this concept that the fully insured carriers, they're making a lot of money off of us in that current model. The one thing I want to highlight here, and it's important to understand this, that if you move into a self-funded model, partially self-funded model, and you're using a carrier today to do everything for you, there's not much of a difference in being fully insured. Yes, in years that you have low claims, you can still win, so it's better from that perspective. But I still think there's three big things that employers need to consider to maximize. Self-funding is a tool. That's the one thing I'll always talk about. It is a starting point. So if we're going on a journey together and we're going to start off on this voyage, we need a map. And that map is going to have a starting destination. It's going to have the pin drop in the map that says, you are here. That's all self-funding is. It's me taking this map and I'm handing it to you with a big spot. You are here. This is where we're starting, right? X on the pin drop. That's self-funding. It's the map with the red pin that says here we are. Your destination that you want to get to is lower costs for your company and lower costs for your employees without sacrificing benefits coverage. And we talk a lot about reducing costs. A lot of the folks I'm talking to, perhaps you're a business owner or a CFO, costs are important to us. When I talk with HR folks and even some owners and CFOs, like, we want to make sure we're really taking care of our employees. We don't want to sacrifice, right? We can cut our nose off to spite our face all day long and just give lesser benefits and reduce costs, but is that really helping us achieve the goal that we have? For the vast majority of employers I talk to, that does not, because we want to attract and retain, we want to be competitive in the marketplace, so the quality of our benefits are super important. So this end destination, if this resonates with you perhaps, we want to reduce costs, but we want really good benefits in the process. And that almost seems like fairy tale land, right? Because we associate paying more for getting more. And if you pay less, you get less. But you've probably seen some of the illustrations that I've shared in prior episodes or maybe on social media where some of these misaligned incentives are, where we actually end up paying more and getting less. And so if you solve for those issues, you can provide more coverage to your employees, even provide coverage at no cost to your employees, even if they go in and have something like delivering a baby, getting a hip replacement, taking an expensive medication. We can create a health insurance benefit program that covers those things at no out-of-pocket costs. No copay to your employees, no out-of-pocket, no deductible, all those sorts of things. And you as the employer, you can save money in the process as well. So the very first starting point of that is getting out of this fully insured. It's kind of like look, you get what you pay for sometimes, right? It's easy. Getting out of that model is the first step to unlocking, designing the benefit program that I just described. When you are buying a fully insured plan, you're buying, it's almost like going to a car lot and you're buying a vehicle that's on the lot. It is what it is. You may have the model that you want, but the price isn't right? You really want that black F-250 Power Stroke diesel, but man, that one that's right here, this is super expensive, $120,000. Well, I don't have the budget for that. That's your fully insured plan with a $500 deductible. It's super expensive to do it. But they've got a canary yellow one, 10%, maybe 15% discount. Kind of hard to sell that one. Your friends are gonna see you in it. And no offense, if you drive a canary yellow one, nobody's judging you. Well, maybe I'm not, but somebody out there is at a red light. I promise you. So no offense, but if you're driving one of those, you got it for a discount. Let's be honest. Why? It's not as valuable. Same thing with your fully insured plan with a $5,000 deductible. That's how most employers, it's probably how you manage your fully insured renewals. Renewal comes in, it's pretty big. We just buy a lesser version of that plan. We buy a higher deductible. And that's really, it's no fault of your own. Those are the only mechanisms that you've been given as an employer to control your costs, is to reduce the benefits. When we change out of this model and we move into self-funding, we now have ability to control the cost, but it is not the solution, it's the starting point. So here are the three biggest mistakes that I see employers making when moving into a self-funded plan, thinking it's the destination when it's only the starting point. And my hope is that you'll take these three and it'll spur some conversation with your advisor and help you avoid these pitfalls that I commonly see employers make. So the very first one is letting the carrier manage all of the aspects of your health insurance plan. So it's very common, particularly if you're with a big broker, big national broker, they love to place your business, just insert name of a carrier, Blue Cross, United Healthcare, Cigna. They'll let the carrier manage all of the pieces of the health insurance pie, which are, the big ones are the network, which is really important. It's employee facing, it's what's on the ID card. The second component of that is going to be your stop loss. That's that reinsurance, catastrophic coverage that I talked about earlier that backs you as a company to protect your budget. And then the third piece of that is going to be the pharmacy benefit management, or the PBM. You've probably heard a lot about this. Mark Cuban talks a lot about it. It's been in the news quite a bit with the way some of these companies are making money. And so by letting that health insurance carrier manage all three components of that, you're getting the same thing as if you were fully insured with that carrier. And that's one of the things that we're trying to get away from when you're fully insured, is that the ability to get away from the trap of you paying more for claims than you should. In fact, there was a recent lawsuit. Johnson & Johnson, J&J, was recently sued by an employee for breach of fiduciary duty. Why? Because they were using a big carrier-owned pharmacy benefit manager, paying almost $10,000 a month for a medication they could have easily gotten with cash or through some other pharmacy program for $30 to $50 a month. Where's the difference? Where does that money go? If they pay $10,000 versus $40 at a farm, where does the difference go? Well, a lot of that money's being shared with the PBM. So I've got an earlier episode that talks about how insurance companies make money, but they actually profit the more you pay for your claims, because guess what? A lot of times they're part of that claim vendor that's being paid, and they're profiting as they're vertically integrated. So we've got to break away from the carriers managing all of the components. And it allows you a couple of things, right? We go back to that car analogy, walking onto the car lot, and we want to get a vehicle, but I'm only able to choose from what's on the lot. That's option one, that's fully insuring. The second option is you know exactly what you want and you can custom build it, but you got to order it. And so that's going to require you to work with somebody that understands the specs and what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what your goals are, what sort of performance that you need, right? Are you towing a big boat and you need something that has a big hauling capacity, or you want something that's fast? You need a race car. Or do you need something that can do both of those things, right? So that's sitting down with an advisor that really understands how to custom build a plan for you to meet the goals that you have. The very first place we start is by breaking away these misaligned incentives and letting the carrier manage these different components of your plan. That's step one. Do not let a carrier manage the components of your plan. If your broker does that, if it's forcing you to pay more than you should. For an average size employer that's about 100 employees, maybe you've got more than that, but you're typically going to pay 20% more just to let a carrier manage. On your pharmacy, you're going to pay 40% more. That's just kind of a rule of thumb that we see as we're working with clients, pulling them out of that model every single day. There's easy ways to reduce the cost without changing medications for your employees, without changing pharmacies they even go to. Allowing the carrier to manage all of these components of your health plan is called bundling. So the direction that we're moving is called unbundling. We want to remove these components from the purview of the carrier, and we want the advisor, we want the broker to manage those things. You're still going to get access to them all on one single bill, but we're going to take the best of what's out in the marketplace. That particular carrier network may be the right one for you, but we may need to use a different stop loss vendor. We may need to use a different pharmacy benefit manager, and using data to help us drive those decisions. That's the most important piece. So brokers love bundling, keeping you with a carrier for two big reasons. The first one is super easy for them. It's almost no different than being fully insured for a broker, for an advisor, to manage that, because they don't have to manage any pieces of it. They're allowing the carrier to do it for you. That's like the fox guarding the hen house. We don't want to allow them to do it because they don't have the incentive to show you what's in your best interest. They have the incentive to show you what they own. It's like walking into a Ford dealership. I'll go back. We do business with a lot of auto dealers, but so I like car analogies. It's like walking into a Ford dealer and asking them, should I buy a Chevy? What do you think they're going to tell you? No, Ford's the best. You're getting this debate of Ford versus Chevy. That's the intent here, right? That's exactly what we're talking about. You can't ask United Healthcare if the XYZ PBM is better than Optum, because Optum's the biggest and baddest, well, it's the second biggest and baddest in the United States. They're going to tell you it's the best option for you. So we need to remove that conflict of interest, and we do that by unbundling, and we use data to help drive that. So the very first reason is easy for brokers. That's why they'll do it. The second reason is, and I think this one is the most important, is the carriers pay big bonuses to brokerages that will keep you with everything within the carrier. It's more profitable for the carrier, therefore the carrier incentivizes the brokerages to continue pushing that. So less work, more money, let me do the math, makes sense. And considering that most of these brokerages, perhaps the one you're dealing with, is probably publicly traded or is private equity backed. And why is that important? because they're managing to a profitability, they're managing to an EBITDA number that they watch like hawks. And who in their right mind is going to reduce the revenue that we make off of a client and do more work, right? So you're probably asking, now that I've said that, why would I do that? Because the work is still profitable if you do it right. There's structures that you can put in place that reward the advisor and reward the employer if we get the result that you want. So those are the questions. Instead of saying, your premiums went up this year, I'm going to get a raise because of that. That just seems like a misaligned incentives. Why would you pay your broker more if you have an increase in your costs? Seems to me like the broker should get paid less. They're not doing a good job. And so we're seeing more structures moving now to where we get performance compensation, probably the same way you pay and incentivize your sales staff, right? The people that generate more value get paid more. And I think there's some validity to that in compensating your brokerage the same way. I don't mind paying you more, but I need to win a lot more for you to get paid more. I think there's some real value in that. So again, letting the carrier bundle everything together, your brokerage gets paid more and they have to do less work because of it. That's reason number one. Reason number two is when you bundle everything with the carrier and you self-fund, you're not typically allowed to put the right programs in place to manage healthcare costs. So again, I talked about as healthcare costs rise, so do your premiums to help pay for those healthcare costs. It's directly correlated. And so the things that I'm talking about are direct contracts. Oftentimes we can go to a hospital, get preferential treatment. They give us better pricing than we give to an insurance company, so then your typical PPO network. Pharmacy benefit programs. So I've talked about this before, but I'll mention it here again. There are programs out there that the big insurance companies don't allow you to use, particularly patient assistance programs, international sourcing of medications. Oftentimes there's copay maximization programs. We can get manufacturer money to help subsidize the costs. They may be doing some of this in the background on your behalf, depending on the PBM, but they're not giving that benefit to you as the employer. And there's a handful of other pharmacy benefit programs that can really help manage the cost of your plan without reducing the benefit to your employees. They don't let you do those. Others are surgical bundles, so going out and getting a care bundle, transparency tools, care navigation programs, having a nurse or a physician being able to guide your patient, your member, to the most cost-effective and the highest and best outcome. A lot of those networks don't allow us to do that sort of thing, particularly if you're bundled with them. So that's step two, is once you are self-funded, we got to layer those programs in. I think a lot of employers are missing that important step. That's where your real savings come, not from being self-funded. Self-funded is just breaking away from the status quo system, unbundling, and then adding these programs. That's step two, adding these programs to help you reduce your claims costs. Your claims costs as a percentage of your total insurance spend in a given year can be anywhere between 60 and 80% of the cost. That's a big variable that nobody really talks about. How do we reduce that cost? Because talk about high leverage and high return, if I can reduce your fixed costs by 10%, and fixed costs represent 20% of the pie, right? It's a very small return, right? We're turning like very little juice coming out of that lime that we're squeezing. But if I say to you, I can reduce your biggest piece that represents 80% and I can cut that in half, wow, that's a big lever that we've just pulled, right? And that's really the goal. And that's where most of our employers today, like you, are seeing the big return on self-funding. Unbundling, step one, putting in the programs that help manage the cost of the claims without reducing your benefits is step two. And in fact, that step two, we're able to enhance benefits because when members are willing to engage in those programs, we waive their costs. So I'll use myself as an example. I've got several examples I'll share with you, but whenever a member engages in a program that's going to cut the cost of a surgery from $60,000 to $20,000, when you're partially self-funded, you CFOs out there, that's a $40,000 savings to you as an employer on that one claim. Would you waive somebody's $4,000 deductible to save $40,000? That's the carrot, right? We want Tommy to engage with the program. What's his incentive? If we waive his costs, he's likely to engage in the program because that $4,000 is super meaningful to him. Okay, if you consider the average American has $1,000 or less in their savings account, if they've got $4,000 in their account, They surely don't want to pay for their medical expenses. That's their vacation fund or their new car down payment or a down payment for their house. Like, give them a choice. You'd be surprised, over 75% of the time, people will engage with that care navigation program and they will write their employer an email or a note saying, thank you. We've even had employees with tears in their eyes saying they couldn't afford the health care. They didn't know how they were going to pay for it. And now they're able to get life-saving care that they need, life-saving medication that they need that they've avoided because it no longer costs them anything. So that's step two. The third step to this that we see employers and in brokerages kind of missing the boat here is they're not actively monitoring and managing their plan throughout the year. So when you're fully insured, there's not really anything that you can do as an employer. You've got your plan, it's been renewed, there's nothing you can do to influence the cost of that plan throughout the course of a year. You might meet at a mid-year just to kind of powwow and, hey, this is how your claims are running so far year to date. And then you get whacked with a renewal increase. Most likely, if you're like a lot of employers that we talk to, you're getting smacked with a renewal as a surprise. You get it 60 days before you renew. And so when you're partially self-funded, it gives you the ability to actively monitor what's going on. You can't manage what you can't measure, all right? That's the old adage. You gotta monitor or measure what you want to manage. It's the same way you manage everything else in your business, right? Your budget. You set a budget at the beginning of the year, and you CFOs and owners out there, you're looking at that budget periodically, whether it's monthly or quarterly. How are we tracking to budget? How are our sales to budget? How are our expenses to budget? Well, believe it or not, and I challenge you to look at this in your P&L. How much do you spend on health insurance in a given year? And how much has that cost risen over the last 5? Where do you project it to go for the next 5? That number represents probably a division of your company. Think about if you've got multiple divisions, it might equal or exceed the size of some of the divisions that you have for your company. Let's manage it like a division of your company. Setting it and forgetting it and then getting whacked with a renewal increase by surprise isn't really the most effective way to do this. The question I would ask, how often are you looking at your company's performance, sales, expenses, to your budget? That's how often we should be looking probably at your health insurance. At least on a quarterly basis, we should be looking at this. Some of our clients want to look at it on a monthly basis or monitor it real time, because when you're partially self-funded, you have the ability to change on the fly during the course of the year. Just like in your business today, with anything else, think about it. If you start seeing that we're going over budget because of something else, right? Not health insurance related, but because of printing costs or because labor costs are rising, we might have to readdress that strategy and not wait until the new fiscal year to address it. We want to address it now so we can start mitigating that cost, or we can address what's driving it. And oftentimes, when we're talking about self-funded health plans, there's typically a program that we can implement that will address that cost. We at least don't want to be blindsided by it. So to summarize this up, self-funding can be a very powerful tool to unlock savings for your company and your employees. But it is not the end destination. It is not the solution. It's part of the solution. It's the very foundation that you would build on top of. Think of it as this really nice concrete slab with piers underneath it. It's solidified. If it's done right, it can be that really solid foundation that we layer on programs and other components of the health plan and actively manage it to be the end destination, to be the success that you're striving to get to. The 3 biggest things that we see employers making as far as a mistake, brokerage is making as part of this mistake when they're going into self-funding, kind of like, actually it's not 3, it's 4. First is thinking that self-funding is the end destination. The second one really is letting the carrier manage all of your programs. That's bundling. We've got to move away from that. The next one is going to be not putting in the proper programs to help manage the cost of your healthcare. Lower healthcare costs mean lower insurance costs for your business and your employees. And 3 is not actively managing, monitoring, and adjusting as needed throughout the year. I hope these have been helpful for you. If you have questions about them, I'm going to link to the playbook that we use with our clients to share with them how to do this properly. And I would encourage you, I've also got a TikTok channel. I'll also link to that. I share a lot of information there. If you've got questions about what this might look like for your business, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to have a quick introduction call, give you some tidbits that you might be able to use when you're working with your advisor. My goal is to help you increase your profitability, increase the valuation of your company, and add more money to your employees' paychecks. Until next time, take care.